This episode is brought to you by my Fertility Friday group programs. New groups are starting in April of 2017, and there are only a limited number of spaces available. Make sure to head over to fertilityfriday.com/group program to reserve your spot today. That's fertilityfriday.com/group program. This is the Fertility Friday podcast, episode number 127. Welcome to the 127th episode of the Fertility Friday podcast. Thank you for joining me today. I'm Lisa from fertilityfriday.com, and this is your source for information about the fertility awareness method and all things fertility. Today I wanted to share with you a special episode, solo format, where I just wanted to really chat with you a little bit and share a few of the things that come up time and time again in the client work that I do and also in the group work that I do. And so because some of these topics come up so regularly and I do spend a lot of time talking about them in my various programs, I know that you listening are going to want to hear more about this. And I recently released a blog post entitled, "How much am I supposed to bleed during my period?" And inevitably, this is a topic that comes up in a number of different ways, from what color is normal to how much am I supposed to be bleeding to what if I'm bleeding too much, what if I'm bleeding too little, what if I'm having a lot of period pain. And so I wanted to chat with you today about that topic, the topic of menstruation and what is normal and what you can expect. And before I jump into that, I just wanted to share with you that I'm really excited to be opening my group programs up again for April. And so I'm accepting enrollment throughout the month of March and the first couple weeks of April. And so there are a limited number of spaces available. If you want to be part of this group, trust me when I say the groups are amazing. I feel so blessed that I attract the most amazing women to me. And so every week before every session, my ladies in the group can attest that the first thing I always say is, "Oh my goodness, I'm so excited for tonight." And each session, I feel as though I learn as much from my amazing ladies as they learn from me. And I feel really blessed to be able to share in their journey, just to be part of their journey at one point or another. And so as I did with my last round of group, I will be dividing the groups. So one focused on birth control and one focused on preconception care, and also if you're actively trying to conceive and looking for support, really understanding how to pinpoint your fertile window and how to interpret your mucus observations, or what to do if your cycles are outside of the normal range, or what is the normal range, to support you in that. That's really what the groups are all about, supporting you in the process so that at the other end, when you finish and you come out of the group, you are 100% confident in the method and you just have it down. And also have learned a ton about how your cycles are connected to your health and your fertility. And so that's what I take you through. I take you through this journey. And what's incredible about it as well is that you're not just there by yourself. You're there with a number of women who are going through the same process. And so it's such a powerful experience. And it's incredible for me just to see how much everyone learns in such a short period of time and how confident each woman becomes, towards the end of the group. I would be delighted to have you in the group. So make sure to head over to fertilityfriday.com/group program to find out more information about the group starting in April and also how to apply. And so in today's episode, I wanted to talk to you about periods and what's normal. And so I think it's an interesting conversation to have for a number of reasons. I think that one of the most interesting things is that until you really delve into fertility awareness, often you kind of think of your period as the only aspect of your cycle. And then once you learn fertility awareness, you realize there's way more stuff going on than just your period. There is your cervical mucus cycle. There's ovulation when it's happening, your luteal phase, trying to get a handle on that and to recognize how long it is and all those different types of things. But in today's show, I'm just going to focus on menstruation because I find that it's a really interesting discussion. And I feel like it's one of those things where we've never really been told what is normal. So if this is a topic that is interesting to you, I did a really interesting episode with Colleen Flowers a long time ago. It's episode number 14, so one of the first episodes that I did in the archives. And so what was really great about that episode was Colleen really took us through what a healthy menstrual cycle is like, and she went through all the parameters, some of which I'm going to go through today. But if this is something that interests you, I would suggest just to go back and have a listen to that episode. So a good place to start when we're talking about what's normal when it comes to periods is just getting a sense of what's actually normal. So what does a normal period look like? It's important to know that a normal period lasts about 3 to 6 days and has a bleeding pattern that is like a crescendo, decrescendo type situation. So what that means is that typically you would expect it to start heavy and then gradually taper off. So moderate or heavy and then kind of gradually tapering off throughout the time. What's really interesting is that when you dive into the research around menstruation, there's a number of studies that have been done, population type studies where they really survey large numbers of women and measure how much they're bleeding in their cycles. And these parameters that have been established are largely derived from those types of studies. What I find the most interesting when you look through that research is that some of the research studies actually include women who are on hormonal contraceptives. And so if you've been listening to the podcast for a while now, you'll know that when you're on hormonal contraceptives, you're not actually having a real period, because in order to have a real period, you need to ovulate. And so when you're on hormonal contraceptives, what happens is you're taking the synthetic hormones, they're suppressing your natural hormones, which then prevents ovulation and has a number of other impacts on your cycle. But when you then stop taking them, so if you're taking the pill is organized so that you have 3 weeks of hormones and then 1 week of no hormones. And so when you stop taking the synthetic hormones, what happens is your body responds with bleeding. And so this is called withdrawal bleeding, but it's not actually period. And many women will notice that the period on the pill, the quote unquote period, the not real period, the fake period, but the fake period on the pill is different to their real period. So many women will report that their fake period is lighter, more manageable, less cramping, etc. Some women will report that it's a slightly heavier, but either way, it's typically not the same as the period that you have when you're not on the pill. So that's a little bit of a side note, but yes, that's something that I found really interesting when delving into the research, that a lot of the time they include women who are on hormonal contraceptives and they measure their bleeding on their pill bleed and count that towards what is considered normal. So that's just something interesting that I find questionable about the way that they do these measurements. But I guess on another note, it's also interesting because we are so ingrained to think of your period on the pill as an actual period, to the point that the researchers don't even question that. They just take it as a normal menstruation, even though it's absolutely not menstruation. All right. So a couple interesting facts about your period. So as I mentioned, a normal period lasts about 3 to 6 days. And what's interesting is you can expect that about 90% of your total blood loss will take place within the first 3 days of your period, with the second day of your period being the heaviest. So I found that to be really interesting when I was going through the research as well, that it's noted that the majority of the blood that you lose is within those first few days. And so that would make sense then with the crescendo, decrescendo pattern, starting moderate to heavy and then tapering off. So then if your period is 4, 5, 6 days, 7 days, then you would notice that, towards the end, there's really hardly anything there, and that would be considered normal. And so in terms of color, I think that's a really interesting question for so many different reasons. But for anyone who is listening and who uses a menstrual cup, having a menstrual cup really changes your relationship with your body and with your period, because all of a sudden you can see it. So you can really get a sense of what your bleeding looks like. I started using a menstrual cup about, wow, I'm getting up there in age, 16 or 17 years ago. That makes me feel a little bit old, but it's the truth. Around, I would say 2000 is when I started using menstrual cup. My very first menstrual cup was a keeper. So that's throwback for anyone who also has been using menstrual cups for that long. And then the Diva cup came out after that. And then actually currently I'm using a lunette. So I've made my rounds. I haven't used too many different brands, but the point is that once I started using my cup, all of a sudden I could see what my period was. And I thought it was a really profound experience, especially coming from the generation of that weird blue liquid stuff on TV. If you've ever seen one of those like Always or Kotex commercials where they have this pad and they pour this weird blue liquid, I could do a whole show on why that is problematic, especially for young women who don't have blue liquid and probably look at that and think there's something wrong with them, or wonder why a period is so taboo that you can't even put a red colored liquid on the advertisement. So side note again, but what I found interesting about it is that, yeah, it's not blue liquid. It's not watery, or it's not water. It's not like water. It's actually blood. And it can vary in consistency, viscosity, texture. Sometimes there's tissue. There were times when I had clots. There were times when I didn't. But ultimately, it was really my experience of using a menstrual cup really emphasized that my experience of using a menstrual cup, let's say compared to using a tampon, after seeing what actually came out of me, it helped me to realize why tampons weren't really that effective for me and why they weren't always that comfortable. And so that's something that I've spoken about on a few different shows, and I actually have an episode coming up within the next couple months. I'm quite a bit ahead in my recording, where we talk a little bit more about menstrual cups, it's really exciting. So once that comes out, I'll link that in the show notes here. But the point that I'm making, though, is in terms of color, what you would expect to see is some variant of red. So that could be like a deep red, like wine, or it could be a really bright red, like a fire truck red. That came to mind probably because of my kids' toys. It's typically a variant of red, and somewhere on that spectrum. Said it can vary in viscosity. And then on the days where you're having the light bleeding as it's tapering off, you can expect, sometimes you'll see brown or pink, and some women will even notice a really dark color, say like black. So if you're seeing blood that is more on the black side, that would indicate it's more oxidized, and possibly that can indicate a few different things. And I would encourage you to go back and listen to the episode that I recorded with Dr. Rosita Arvigo. Again, that's one of the oldies but goodies. That's number 18. So that's going back quite a ways. But if you haven't listened to that episode, or if I say Arvigo therapy and you have no idea what I'm talking about, or if I say vaginal steaming and again you have no idea what I'm talking about, then I would definitely encourage you to go back and listen to the episode that I recorded with Dr. Arvigo, because one of the things about paying attention to the color of your bleeding and the consistency and really getting a sense of what's happening, especially with respect to your bleeding. And like I mentioned, this is something that has come up with many of my clients, and also has come up in a number of my groups where, for instance, if you're having bleeding that is really viscous, kind of like molasses, like it's not really liquidy. And then if you ever have spotting that's more on the really dark brown or black side, kind of that type of presentation, then it could be an indication that perhaps your menstrual lining isn't fully emptying the way that it should. And there could actually be some old blood hanging out and collecting in there. And so that's why that episode with Dr. Rosita Arvigo was really profound and powerful, because she talked in depth about the process of vaginal steaming and how it can really loosen up and help your uterus to really empty some of those contents that perhaps it wouldn't otherwise. And she also talked about the Arvigo therapy, which is the physical manipulation of your uterus to help ensure that it's aligned properly and restore proper circulation. And it can also help to break up any adhesions or anything, and it kind of ensure everything is properly aligned in the right place. And she talked about some of the reasons why your uterus may become misaligned or some of the situations that could potentially cause that to happen. And so that's something to consider. So to talk about the color, it's really important and helpful to know what to expect to see. But also it's helpful to know that there are gentle, natural ways of improving that if you do see that your bleeding is looking a little bit more on the problematic side. And what's really interesting is then throughout the group work and throughout my client work, I've had a number of clients see a great deal of improvement in terms of their menstruation, their bleeding, especially the color. What's really interesting, so my personal experience, so this might speak to you, it might not, but when I was on the pill, I noticed the color of my bleeding. It just was not the same. It was really kind of dull in color, not super bright red. And I remember coming off the pill and thinking like, wow, like this is really red. This is blood. Like this is really red. So I can't say that, my period's the same color every time. Sometimes, sometimes it's darker, sometimes it's brighter, but I can say that, like I said, it should be a variant of red, and sometimes it'll be bright red. And so, if you're seeing, there's something to think about. So I'll leave the color there for now, but I want to get into how much you should be bleeding, because this is a really big topic. This is something that comes up in every group that I have, because I always spend a good amount of time in at least one of our sessions really going through and hashing out what a normal, healthy menstruation looks like, and not just the period, but of course the whole cycle. Again, I reference those population studies that go through what's considered normal. So what's really interesting is that based on those population studies, there's always a range of bleeding that's given. And so the range that I've seen could be anywhere from 5 milliliters to 80 milliliters. What's interesting about the population studies is that they don't necessarily identify, for instance, if a woman has a particular issue or condition, or whether she's fertile or infertile. They just go on averages. And what I found as well is that 80 milliliters is typically the top end. So to put that into a bit more perspective, if you use a menstrual cup, 80 milliliters would mean that you fill a menstrual cup probably about 4 to 5 times in your whole cycle. So in terms of what is normal, based on my experience, based on my research, based on all of the information I have available to me, a normal period, a normal amount of blood would be anywhere from, let's say, about 25 milliliters and 80 milliliters of bleeding, meaning that throughout your whole period, all of the days, you fill your menstrual cup, or at least almost fill it at least once. And so if you don't use menstrual cups, to put that into perspective, the estimates vary a little bit as to how much bleeding you would expect to see, like in one pad or one tampon. But depending on what type of tampon, whether it's like a light or, like a super, same thing with pads, you would expect that it would hold anywhere from, say, depending on how much you're bleeding, but let's say like 3 to 5 milliliters and maybe 8 milliliters on the heavy end. Like if you have a super duper pad or one of those super tampons and it's like completely soaked. So you can do the math there. So an average of about 5 milliliters per pad or tampon. So then to have 25 milliliters, that would mean you were filling at least 5 throughout your entire cycle, like soaking at least 5. So that puts it into perspective. And I find it really interesting when I have this discussion with clients one-on-one and in a group setting, because I find that often women will fall kind of on one end or the other. Either they think like, whoa, like that is so much bleeding, or they'll think, oh, I think I bleed more than that. And what's really interesting is because we've never really been taught as women, like what's normal, and these are conversations we typically don't have, then it can be really unnerving to think like, oh my goodness, like some women bleed more than that. And so what's really interesting is that in the population studies that have been done, the reason that the 80 milliliters is the top of normal is because typically if a woman is bleeding more than that throughout her period, then she's at a higher risk for having iron deficiency, and she's more likely to potentially have something that's causing that. So for instance, if a woman has fibroids or some sort of kind of endometrial, maybe perhaps she has endometriosis or adenomyosis or something like that, then she would typically bleed more than that or equal to that. So there are a lot of different situations that can contribute to heavy bleeding. So 80 milliliters is the cap, because when women bleed more than that in their cycle, they're just at an increased risk of being deficient iron. And what's interesting about that is that if you're deficient in iron, you are likely to bleed more. So that's really, it's interesting. It's like, is it the chicken or the egg? But they're both involved. Excessive bleeding can cause iron deficiency, but iron deficiency can cause excessive bleeding. On the low end of that, though, I think it's really important for women to know that there is a such thing as not having enough bleeding. And so that's something that comes up a lot as well. And the interesting thing is that whenever I talk about topics like this, of course, the first natural question that's going to come to your mind, especially if you're concerned that you're not bleeding enough, is, well, what do I do to bleed more then? Like, can I just take this supplement or this other thing to make me bleed more? Like, how do I fix it? And what I always remind my clients of, and what I always talk about in the group programs, is that your bleeding isn't happening in isolation. Your bleeding is a result of your hormonal profile. And so there's a whole, every cycle we have estrogen levels rising that leads to ovulation. And then after ovulation, you have progesterone levels rising. And so your menstruation, what you see when you have your period, is a result of all of the things that have happened throughout your cycle. It's a result of having a healthy growth and development of your endometrial lining throughout both sides of your cycle, the pre-ov and the post-ov. And so in order to change or improve your cycle, it really comes down to a much bigger picture of what's happening with you hormonally. And so it's never an easy answer to say like, oh, you just have to do this, because for each woman, there could be a different contributing factor that could be throwing off her hormones. And, we don't really know what that is until we're able to really get in there, look at her charts, do an in-depth history, figure out what could be going on, and then really go from there and do some problem solving and fact finding to determine what could be causing the issue. But I think it is important to know that there is a such thing as too little bleeding. And typically, if a woman then is having super light periods, like really, really light, like she maybe feels half of a cup in her whole period. And I know for some of you listening, you have heavy cycles. You can't even imagine that a person could have that little bleeding throughout their whole cycle. And then for those of you who are listening who have super light periods, can't even imagine that there's a woman out there that could fill 6 cups, throughout her whole cycle. Well, imagine filling 3 in a day. So there's a lot of variation. And part of the reason why I say that is just because we should all know as women, because, I have only seen my period, right? So that's the only period that I know. And that would mean that I think everyone else's period is kind of like mine. So I think it's really important to know that there's quite a bit of variation, and there's a lot of different reasons for that. But I think it's also important to know that there is a such thing as too light. What's really interesting is there's a few different studies that talk a little bit about the fact that in order to conceive, you do have to have a certain thickness of your endometrium. So if your endometrial lining doesn't fully develop, then that could conceivably, and the research suggests that it could also prevent you from getting pregnant. And your doctor can do an ultrasound and measure the thickness of your endometrial lining. So in the studies that they quote around this, they actually will tell you like women whose endometrial lining was less than this thickness didn't conceive. It's usually regarding assisted reproductive technology, the studies. But either way, they're finding that, within a certain range of endometrial thickness, women conceive. And if it's thinner than that, then they don't. And to add more to that, one of the effects of hormonal contraceptives, so whether it's the pill or the hormonal IUD or, the depot shot or the implant, regardless of what type of hormonal contraceptive it is, one of the specific effects and the reason why it works is that it really reduces the thickness of your endometrial lining. And so you can do a little bit of research and find out exactly how thin it makes the lining. But I think it's really important to note that the amount of your bleeding then is related to how well your endometrial lining is developed. All right. I hope that at least gives you an idea of what is normal in terms of how much bleeding is normal. It's a little bit of a ramble because I was kind of going to a few different places, but I do hope that you found that to be helpful. So just to touch a little bit then on the heavy end. So if you do find that you're flooding, essentially, like if you use a cup and on your heaviest days, you're changing it like every 2 hours, or you fill that puppy like 4 or 5 times in a day or something like that, then you know that you're on the heavy end, and you just might want to check out a few things. So if you're bleeding that much and you're bleeding that much regularly, you do want to check out just your iron levels just to see where they're at. Because I mean, that makes logical sense that if you're losing a ton of blood every time you have your period, that conceivably you may just want to check on that, make sure you're getting enough iron. And the other thing is that you may just want to, if you've never had an ultrasound done, just to kind of check everything out, you may want to consider just doing that. Just, do I have fibroids? Is there anything else going on there? Because that is considered to be excessive if it's more than that. So something to consider. And ultimately, the one other point that I want to make in this discussion of what's normal, I think that it's really a lot of my clients, a lot of the women in my group programs have recently come off of hormonal contraceptives. And I think it's a really amazing time shortly after you've come off of hormonal contraceptives, or even quite a while after, if you've noticed that your cycles haven't leveled out and really settled down. I think it's a really great time to focus on your cycles and really take that time to learn about your body, especially if you've been on hormonal contraceptives for quite some time. I think it offers you an amazing opportunity just to really connect with what's happening. And I think one of the most profound reactions that I have from the women in my group programs and my clients is just how quickly your cycle responds to seemingly unrelated things going on in your life. And that's one of the most interesting aspects that I find when I'm working with women, is that whenever we see certain anomalies in the cycle, we just have to do a little fact finding to find out what was going on in her life at that time. And inevitably, there's always something. And so it really helps women in general to connect with their cycles and connect with their femininity and start to appreciate it more. And another completely other hand, and we talk about this all the time on the show, is just how it also reminds you regularly how intimately connected your cycles are with your health. And so that's a huge theme in all of the programs that I do. And one of the aspects of my programs that I'm so proud of is that the women that I work with really leave with a strong sense of how intimately their cycles are connected with what's happening in their lives. But with that said, the point that I wanted to make is that when you have recently come off of hormonal contraceptives, there are a number of ways that your cycle is going to be different to normal. I've never personally seen a woman who has very recently come off of hormonal contraceptives with a cycle that's within normal parameters. I just have never seen it. It doesn't mean it's not possible, but I would imagine that if I were to see something like that, it would be a different scenario. For instance, if a woman was 19 or something and she was on the pill for 6 months, well, then yeah, I could conceive that her cycles would come back fairly quickly and be fairly normal within the regular parameters. But typically, the women that I work with have been on hormonal contraceptives for, anywhere from 5 years or more, 10 years, sometimes 15 years. So there's a couple things going on there. One is that the normal communication that happens between your brain and your ovaries hasn't happened for 10 years. So sometimes that takes a bit of time for that to start happening again, first of all. So for you to start ovulating again and start getting your period again. But then the second thing is for that to actually become healthy and robust. But beyond that, you're also 10 or 15 years older. So even if you had never been on hormonal contraceptives, there's a number of natural changes that happen as you age that we have to take into account as well. So what I want to share with you, and the reason that I'm bringing this up, is because when we're talking about periods and what's normal, just like if we were talking about your menstrual cycle and what's normal, it's really important to remember that if you've recently come off of hormonal contraceptives, what's normal is for it to be abnormal. And that's just how it is. So that's a really critical time to really focus on supporting your body, supporting your hormones, restoring everything that has been depleted, and really taking the time to understand what different factors could be at play. And it's not something that's easy to do on your own. It's not even something that's easy to do with somebody who's working with you, because in order to really get at the changes that you want to see, you really have to dive in there and often make some really critical and not always easy changes just to your routine and potentially diet and lifestyle, different things like that really have a profound impact on what you're seeing in your cycles. So if you've just come off the pill and you're listening to this podcast and you're super nervous that, oh my goodness, my cycles don't look this way, there must be something wrong with me, I just want to encourage you to remember that for some women, it takes several months just for their period to come back. And that's not a healthy cycle. That's just a cycle. And then for other women, even if their cycles come back quite quickly, it often takes some time for those cycles to become, ovulatory, healthy, and for the cycle parameters to move more within a normal range. And so, yes, that's what I wanted to share with you today about your period. I would love to hear your thoughts on this episode. If you liked it, if there was aspects that you wish I would have covered a little bit more, or if there were a few things that you thought, I already knew that, Lisa, I'd love to hear your comments. So make sure to head over to the show notes page and let me know what you thought of it. And of course, if you enjoyed today's episode, please share it with a friend. You'll find the show notes page for today's episode at fertilityfriday.com/127. If you've been enjoying the podcast, please look for it on iTunes and leave a 5-star review so that more people can find it. I can't tell you how much I appreciate all of the reviews that you all have left. I have the best audience ever. If I'm ever having a bad day, I can just go to my iTunes account and just search for Fertility Friday and look at the reviews, and then I feel all warm and fuzzy again. So you're the best. I really appreciate it. And all of those reviews really help other women to find the show. And of course, that's what I'm trying to do with the podcast and with my blog posting and all of the different media channels that I'm trying to slowly take over. I feel that this message is really important. I know that it has changed my life learning this, and I always feel so grateful that I somehow stumbled on this when I was 19. I know some of you listening would have loved to stumble on this when you were 19. And so I really appreciate all of you for helping me to spread the word. As many of you may know or may not know, I recently hit an incredible milestone as far as the podcast is concerned. Actually, as I'm recording this, just this weekend, I hit 500,000 downloads. Oh my goodness, I don't even know. That's just crazy. When I first started this podcast, I didn't know if anyone would listen. And I'm pretty sure that the first month when I released my first episode, I started in December, so I probably released 2 episodes in December of 2014. I'm pretty sure that I had 17 downloads for the whole month. I'll have to go double check that. But let's just say we've come a long way. And so this is all because of you. For all of you who are listening, for sharing the show, for telling your friends about it, for, tagging your friends on certain episodes and emailing certain episodes to your friends or texting them or just generally talking about it. It's really word of mouth that makes a huge, huge difference just to get the word out. So thank you all so much for hanging with me. I know some of you have been with me from the beginning, which is incredible. And one of the things that I also think is really incredible is that so many of you who discover the podcast, you actually go back and listen to most of the episodes, if not all. And that's absolutely incredible. So I really actually believe that the Fertility Friday audience is the best. You guys are amazing. That milestone, I don't know, it really hit me because that's 500,000, ladies. That's 500,000 downloads. So that's really, really exciting for me. And I can't wait to see what happens next. And of course, if this episode today, all about menstruation, bleeding, periods, if that really struck a chord with you, if that really hit home, and you have ended up with 1,000 questions about your own period, and you've realized that you're wanting a little bit more support just to understand and to really deepen into your understanding of your cycles, then I would encourage you to head over to my group program page and just take a look at the programs coming up in April. So I've mentioned it on the show that registration is now open, and I would love to have you in the group. So just head over to fertilityfriday.com/group program. And if you have an idea for a podcast episode or a guest suggestion, please send me an email at info@fertilityfriday.com. I love it when you send your requests, and I know some of you have tagged me in the Facebook group. So if you're new to the show, you can head over to fertilityfriday.com/community and you'll be redirected to the Facebook group. But I know a lot of you have tagged me in there, and many of you have sent me emails, and honestly, it's incredible. I actually have a folder full of incredible ideas. It's like I need to start doing like a bi-weekly or 3 episodes a week just to keep up. But I really appreciate all of the suggestions that you've given me. It really helps me to keep this podcast fresh and new, and it really helps to connect me with other professionals that a lot of times maybe I haven't heard of yet. So I really appreciate all of that. So I just want to thank you so much for hanging out with me today for my solo episode, my bonus episode for all of you. I really appreciate you for taking the time to tune into the podcast and let me be part of the day. And I really appreciate you for supporting this show. And as always, until next time, be well and happy charting.